Hello and welcome to VPI Conversations, a video series investigating the virtual public involvement practices that state and local agencies use for transportation planning and project development. VPI Conversations is part of the Federal Highway Administration's Virtual Public Involvement Program and Everyday Counts initiative. My name is Jim Thorne and I'm with the Federal Highway Office of Planning, and today I'll be speaking with Nick Meltzer, Transportation Manager from Corvallis Area Metropolitan Planning Organization in Oregon, about virtual open houses, bilingual resources, and low-cost strategies. Thank you for joining us today, Nick.
Hey Jim, pleased to be here.
So to begin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Corvallis Area Metropolitan Planning Organization and your role there?
Sure. So the Corvallis Area Metropolitan Planning Organization is located in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And collectively, we have 60,000 residents. It's one primary city, which is Corvallis, and then two smaller cities and part of the county.
Can you talk about the VPI techniques that you used and why you initiated that?
It was important to me to figure out how I could get the most public engagement with kind of the least effort, just because as the only full-time staff person, there's so many other things going on that I need to deal with. And so we used a virtual open house, an online interactive map, and then a comment form. And we did all of those things in both English and Spanish to try and engage as broad an array of stakeholders as we could.
So one of the strategies that you used was this virtual open house. Can you share a little bit more about how you worked through that process?
The idea was suggested by one of our technical advisory committee members. In his previous experience, they had had a lot of success with engaging more folks, and then also as a lower staff effort. And the fact that it's electronic means the data is kind of more easily collected and then more easily dispersed out after the fact. And so I was on a tight timeline. What could I do to engage a broad array of stakeholders in a short amount of time?
I can just imagine being in your situation that it sounds a little risky to think I'm going to try this new technology, this new approach than the way I've always done it. Did that cause you any hesitation to think, how to make this happen in a virtual world?
I had to figure out parts of it, but I also had a team that could kind of support me. The MPO is housed at a regional council of governments. And because of that, I can tap into some support staff. And so before I kind of jumped in with both feet, I checked with my colleague who does translation and updates our website on a regular basis, and then also a colleague of mine who does our GIS mapping services.
So how did CAMPO publicize the virtual open house?
We didn't have time to stand up kind of a separate website, anything separate. So we just housed it on our existing website. And then I kind of developed a nice visually pleasing flyer. Then that directed everyone to the website where all the information was, and then also kind of the interactive map and comment form were.
The interactive map, what all did that include, or what would a person experience by taking in that map?
And on the interactive map, it was a GIS-based map, and it had all the projects for the region. And then there was also a comment form on kind of a separate link that you could comment on the projects that were all numbered on the map.
So you had this Google feedback form that folks could complete as part of the virtual open house. How did that process work, and what kind of response did you get?
When thinking about kind of the easiest way to provide an opportunity for people to submit comments, I thought of Google Forms, which is kind of used by a handful of nonprofits that I've experienced.
And was that a bilingual? You mentioned earlier that you had translations for the narrative information that was provided in the virtual open house. How did that apply in the response form?
Other virtual public involvement examples that I saw, they would kind of predominantly have an English landing page, and then there would be kind of one sentence in Spanish that said, for Spanish language translation, call this number or click here. I was familiar with Title VI requirements that state if you have more than 5% of the population that has limited English proficiency, then you're required to translate all your materials into whatever the dominant language is after English. And so using that as a litmus test, I used census data to look at the MPO region and realize that, in fact, there was more than 5% of the population that had limited English proficiency, and the dominant language was Spanish. And so it was important to me to think about a way to make the entire process kind of transparent in Spanish. And so we did that through kind of doubling the text throughout the flyer, the website, and the map. And so the there would be two versions of the text. The first one would be in English, and then the second version would be in Spanish in a different color. And when we kind of tried that initially, it ended up working out really well, because what it meant is you only had one flyer to worry about. You only had one website to worry about. And then someone kind of from the public's perspective, if they were English speaking, then they could read through the website in English, kind of following the appropriately colored text. Or if they were Spanish speaking, then they could do the same thing and kind of have the same experience reading through the website in the Spanish text, which was just in a different color. And so thinking about kind of really trying to engage the Spanish speaking population, it was important to me to provide kind of the same experience for someone, whether they spoke English or whether they spoke Spanish.
Nick, could you tell us how CAMPO incorporated the public input and comments from that virtual open house and the Google feedback form? How did that influence the transportation improvement program?
The list of projects that we put out for public comment had initially been chosen by the Technical Advisory Committee. And so we made that clear to people, and then we made it clear that their input would be considered in the process. The Technical Advisory Committee reviewed all of the public comments, and based on the review of those comments, they decided whether or not to adjust the project list. And when it came to the policy board to approve the final list of projects, they were really interested in knowing what the public had commented on. And so using the Google feedback form, I made a spreadsheet of all the public comments and how they related to each project, and then provided that as part of the kind of memo that I gave to the policy board for approving the final tip.
As you went through this process of organizing the comments and talking to your technical advisory committee and to your policy board, do you have a sense of what they thought about this virtual approach? Any feedback from the technical or the policy board about the virtual open house versus a more traditional in-person event?
One advantage I think we found with the virtual public open house is that the way our MPO is set up is there's kind of one major city, and then the two other cities are smaller. So if we, for example, if we had an open house, we probably would have only had one, and we probably would have had it in the biggest city because it's central to the region. And just having folks have to travel from, 10 or 15 minutes to a different city, I think probably wouldn't happen. And so the advantage to the virtual open house is that people from all the different communities could kind of comfortably comment on those projects from their own home. And so it provided kind of a more broad and potentially more robust opportunity for engagement. And I think the TAC recognized that. And so they were really happy with it. And then the policy board, I think, was encouraged by the new method and encouraged by the number of comments.
As the MPO moves forward and updates the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or the Public Participation Plan, how do you see virtual public involvement coming into play in those major efforts?
I think I'm looking forward to using it more and kind of refining our methods, recognizing that this is how long public comment's going to be. These are the community groups that we want to target. And then we have this bilingual flyer, and we're going to purposely reach out to those communities and provide them the opportunity to input.
Did you experience any challenges with the use of VPI strategies, or are there things you would do differently going forward to better leverage virtual public involvement for your planning process?
Yeah, I can think of a couple things. So first, I think having kind of a written out plan for what the approach was going to be. And I think in the future, I would make more of an effort to develop that plan beforehand. And so, okay, we want to do bilingual. We want to do a virtual open house. This is how we're going to distribute it. This is how we're going to target limited English proficiency populations. And this is how long we're going to have it open for, and just kind of be more thoughtful and intentional about it in the beginning.
So, Nick, as manager for a small MPO, did you find virtual public involvement to be an effective use of your time and resources?
Yeah, I found it really effective. I think it was a better use of my staff time, kind of as a one person or one full-time person MPO, thinking about having to set up and develop materials for an in-person open house, as opposed to being able to just do everything from my desk was a huge help. And I think we also got kind of a broader array of input. So I think it was a big success.
Thank you again to Nick Meltzer of Corvallis Area MPO for speaking with us today. If you want to catch more VPI conversations or learn more about virtual public involvement strategies, please visit the website on the screen or click the link in the description. Thanks for joining us.